Hi, welcome to this episode of Teaching Academia. I am Leigh Hall, and today we're going to be talking about reading without walls. And specifically, we'll be talking about what is reading without walls, what does that mean, and how can you incorporate it into your instruction. Now, reading without walls was started, it's a challenge, it's a reading challenge that was started by Gene Yang, and it's really, he ran it for the month of April. I'm going to link to Gene and his description of reading without walls in the show notes. But it's something that you can do anytime. It doesn't have to be done just during April. And what it is intended to do is to really encourage more diverse reading. The idea that you might read books about a new topic, something that you know very little about, in a different format. Maybe you listen to an audiobook when you never listened to audiobooks before. Maybe you read a graphic novel. Maybe you read a comic book. Maybe you read books that have people that are very different from yourself, be it fiction or nonfiction. But think about how to diversify your reading and not always just read the same kinds of things that you always read. Now, I'm thinking about this for instruction. How can you incorporate it? One obvious way to do it is you can do it as extra credits, all right? It doesn't have to be something that you require your students to engage in. But you can, and then, whether you do it as extra credit or if you require it, you can think about the books that students might read in two ways. One is you can just allow students to self-select books. And, if you teach a particular content area, for example, if you teach biology, then you're going to want, I would imagine, students to self-select books that fit into the subject of biology, right? If you're teaching British literature, then self-selecting books, right, from this idea of a diverse group of books that fall into British literature. So you could put some boundaries around it, okay, or not. The other thing is you could provide a range of books for students to choose from. So again, right, if you teach biology, you might come up with a diverse set of books, and you'd want to come up with a pretty long list. Like I would imagine you'd want to come up with at least 50 and then have students selecting books from that list. Now, the question that follows, of course, when you do this in your class is how do you know that students read? Because students, particularly if it's not required, right, students may or may not be reading these books, right? You have no way of knowing. And obviously, even if it is required, everybody's not reading the same book, right? If students are self-selecting. You could, of course, require it, and you could have students reading the book. I think that's sort of the same books at the same time, but I think that sort of defeats the challenge a little bit. That students, a key point for this is to have students really being reflective on what kinds of things do they typically read and how can they diversify, and in what ways are they interested in diversifying. So when we think about how do you know if students read, one thing is tell them to provide the proof. Make it their responsibility to show you that they read. If they're old enough to do that, give them the responsibility. Don't do all the work for them. You can use book snaps. I did a video on that previously, and I will link to it in the show notes. You can have students create a series of blog posts about their experiences with reading without walls. They can use Twitter. There's a hashtag for this, hashtag read without walls. They can make a storify and storify their journey of all the books that they read over the course, of the time that they did this. They can make podcasts. So those are just some ideas for you. But again, feel free to fall back on asking them to provide the proof. All right, so please feel free to contact me. I'm on email at leahhall39@gmail.com, and check out my blog, leahhall.wordpress.com, where we talk about issues of teaching and learning in higher education.